When it comes to great art, there are some creators and some pieces that transcend that greatness. When it comes to paintings, we might point to Da Vinci and the Mona Lisa, for example. And for me, when it comes to both music and movies, there is a single piece of art that manages to transcend both of these mediums, simultaneously existing both as a cultural pillar in the world of rock music and as one of the single greatest movies ever made. I'm talking, of course, about This Is Spinal Tap, the rockumentary that tells the story of an aging British rock band through the ups and downs of touring whilst trying to get their new record out. David St. Hubbins, Nigel Tufnell and Derek Smalls form the core of this iconic group. Directed and created by Marty DeBurgi, he says that he set out to capture the sights, the sounds, the smells of a touring band. And he knows explicitly that he ended up getting much, much more than he could ever have imagined. And he was right. Now, of course, I'm playing along with the gag here, as in reality, along with being a rockumentary, This Is Spinal Tap was also the first great mockumentary. Spinal Tap itself is a fictional band. Marty DeBurgi is, of course, actually Rob Reiner, and the members are portrayed by Michael McKean, Christopher Guest, and Harry Shearer. But what Marty DeBurgi said is, nevertheless, 1000% true. And what they ended up creating was quite simply a transcendent piece of art.
But then if you keep folding it, it keeps breaking, and then you'll...
So transcendent, in fact, that many people in the business and beyond legitimately believed it was a real documentary about a real band, including myself, who, as a young teenager, couldn't quite figure out why Steed, Patrick McNee, was managing Polymer Records. Now, the first thing I always love to note about this film is that it essentially had no script. Rather than write actual dialogue, they just spent time developing the lore and history of the group. Past exploits, anecdotes that they shared and could later then refer to. They created a story, and from that basis, essentially improvised the entire movie. The direction for a scene might be something like the band has an argument, and then Ian the manager gets angry, quits, and storms out. And from that basis, they act out the scene. Now, I personally love this concept, as it does allow for more spontaneity and real emotion in some of the reactions, like real laughter, for example. But it only works so well in this case because of the truly god-tier quality improv skills of the actors and the gargantuan amount of work they did to build up that lore. Another reason the film works so well is that the band is legitimately made up of amazing musicians that wrote and produced some genuinely incredible music. And with all these pieces in place, they just got to work and created what is, in my mind, a top 10 greatest film ever made. Now, by the time I started to play the guitar, a little under 25 years ago, gulp, the legend of Spinal Tap had already been firmly established in our culture. Watching the movie at that time almost felt like a rite of passage for us. There were so many iconic moments from the film that just became intertwined with our culture in, like I said, both the world of music and the world of movies.
Shit sandwich.
I mean, everyone knows the moments and the jokes that quite literally go up to 11. But for me, it's the more subtle moments.
It really puts perspective on things, doesn't it?
Not too much. There's too much fucking perspective now.
Those kind of throwaway little lines that only appeared in the actor's mouth for that one single take. But because it was that one take that they used, that ends up being like a little secret iconic moment that you feel like only you've noticed.
It's really one of those things. It was, the authorities said, best leave it. It's not unsolved, really,
Honestly, I could just keep going on and on and on about those moments, as there just seem to be so many. And I really am not exaggerating when I say that I do honestly think this is the funniest film ever made.
So that's what, 50 hours?
120 hours.
That's actually about 30 minutes.
And do you have any of those personal under-the-radar moments that you love that you kind of think that no one else noticed? Let me know in the comments and I'll be down there to discuss. But the film ultimately turns out to be a very emotional, heartfelt story of brotherhood, hard work, human creativity. And what I truly love about it is that it genuinely feels so organic. Now, improvising a film in this way isn't an inherently good or bad way to make a film. But what it does mean is that there was basically no way that they could have had any idea what it was they were actually setting out to create. Now that takes courage, as it could have been good, and it obviously was, but it was honestly a lot more likely that it would have just sucked. It was true, fearless creative risk, and that creative energy is irresistible and overwhelming, to me at least. But to be fair, this risk factor, this unknown, is true with almost all great art. You know, when we experience it, no matter what it is, if it's a painting, if it's a YouTube video, a piece of music, you know, a movie, we often think that it must have been conceived in this final form and then simply realized by its creator or creators. And it often makes us feel quite inadequate by comparison. But this is almost never true. The artist has their idea, they start planning, etc., but then they just get to work and they begin to make discoveries, they begin to make adjustments as they are doing that work, and piece by piece they begin building their creation, and they are going to be discovering what it is they are creating as they are in the process of creating it. And once it's finished, they will have ended up with something that they could never have imagined when they set out. And I talk about this as well in my video on the photography for Predator, which you can check out right here. But when it comes to This Is Spinal Tap, it's like they turned the unpredictability dial all the way to, well, you can guess. Now, a great example of this was laid out by the late Tony Hendra, who portrayed Ian, the band's manager. Supposedly, when production began, he was in the depths of a suicidal depression. He felt that he had absolutely no idea what he was doing, and he had received only one piece of truly useful advice. Listen. Listen to everything everyone says, notice everything everyone does, and just react, which he dutifully took on board. This was the first scene that he shot in the film, and he later described this moment where Rob would have shouted action. He was listening to the band members talking amongst each other, and he described this moment when suddenly, sat in the back of the limo, despite not knowing what on earth he was doing there, he suddenly noticed this strange voice coming out of his mouth, uttering words that weren't his. And he was suddenly in the moment, in the flow, and expressing some of the most pure human creativity possible. What words was he going to say? Well, he had no idea. They knew the subject that they were talking about, they'd done the homework, they knew each other's characters, but beyond that, it was just improvised. It could have been total incoherent nonsense, but alas, it ended up being great. But don't get it twisted, it isn't just like they turned up and winged it, they did an insane amount of work, but they set out on a very unpredictable, chaotic production, but goodness me, it ended up being something amazing. So think about this. With no script, no real way of communicating their vision, because nobody had ever done anything like this before, to potential investors and studios, how on earth could they have gone about pitching the idea? Well, they started filming little vignettes and interviews with the band members just to try and convey what it was they were envisioning for the movie. And somewhat understandably, there was not great excitement for the concept. Eventually, Norman Lear, believe it or not, who had worked with Rob before, supposedly stepped in to guarantee the $2 million budget along with broad creative freedom to Rob and the guys. And the result was, as I've said, one of the most iconic movies in history. And that, my friends, is true greatness. Now, along with many of you, I am excited, I'm nervous, intrigued for the imminent release of Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues. Ultimately, I just simply don't think it's going to be possible to create anything that will remotely compare to the original movie. After all, with that one, they were quite literally charting unknown waters and defining themselves in real time. Now, however, they are making a sequel with that identity not only having been established, but with it having been incubating and fermenting for 4 decades. So many memories, anecdotes, laughs, jokes, and stories only exist because of This Is Spinal Tap. And whilst it will be impossible to trap lightning in a bottle for the second time, I have to admit that I am just happy we're going to have the opportunity to spend a bit more time with these historic icons, have some laughs, and if we're lucky, create a few new memories too. Lord knows the world needs it right now. Well, thank you very much for tuning in once again, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this slightly more brief look back at what is one of my favorite movies ever made, and I'm sure one of your favorite movies as well. And of course, if you've got any stories, anecdotes, memories about This Is Spinal Tap, please do comment with them down below, because I love reading those stories, and I'll be delighted to come down and chat about them with you. Now, as I intimated in the last video, or it might have been the one before that actually, I'm working on a pretty massive video at the moment. Whilst I'm doing that, I'm working on some smaller videos like this about stuff that I just really want to talk about. So if you got any kind of enjoyment out of this video whatsoever, please consider dropping a like, as it does help the channel a lot. And if you want to see more stories about cool, awesome stuff, maybe even consider clicking the subscribe button. But with that, I hope you have a wonderful day. I want to thank you again for stopping in, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.